he is. Pastor, in fact, actually, affectionately known in Kenya as Prof, but we just know him as Pastor Peter Kay.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Great pleasure to be here again and to worship God together. Well, I want to speak about these prodigals, whom Dave read to us about from Luke's Gospels. I think there are rather a lot of them in this story. But let's just get a bit of a setting first, because you may remember we started at verse 11 of the chapter, but we're actually going to just read the first couple of verses, putting a context in which Jesus is telling these parables, putting a frame around it. Because you see, the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And that wasn't a good thing. That was a bad thing in their book. We might think, well, that's one of the beauties of Jesus. They hadn't got that message yet. So that was a bad thing. That somehow there was something wrong with him because of the kind of people he was associating with. So he's telling the story in that context. Right. Am I going to start this off? So there's that lovely picture by Rembrandt of the return of the prodigal, which we're building up to. But it's just a little hang on the word prodigal. Not a very common word, really, is it? Prodigal. Spendthrift. So we get the idea of that first son, that younger son, all his money was gone. He had no trouble in spending the lot. It was all gone. He began to be in want. Spendthrift. From another point of view, you could say it means recklessly generous. So I think we're touching that first son, but also we're going towards the father. Recklessly generous. Let's get the fatted calf. Let's get the best robe. So there's a wide space. Generous with nothing left to give. And prodigal also reckless in the sense of making decisions which impact you and your community badly. And I think that refers to the second son, because he makes decisions and his behavior towards his younger brother and his father are, I would say, reckless. They're prodigal. So that's our question. Now, you know that I study the Bible and try to get new understanding of ideas. And people, they churn them out regularly, new ideas, new understandings. But there's just one theory I think we can rule out as not true. And this is the idea that the prodigal came home just to get his washing done. Okay, so we can rule that theory out. He didn't come home just so mum could look after him. Okay, so we'll just rule that one out very quickly in case some of you guys were thinking of that, but he didn't come home just to get his washing done. This parable, as Chris has said, it's one of the best known. He said it was the first part of the Bible, perhaps he almost, he can remember knowing. And he was describing how he first read it in a pop-up storybook. Just a young child. I can remember one of the first sermons I heard, by contrast, from someone at Oxford University who had actually been part of the team who came up with the Big Bang theory of creation. He was a big brain box. But I heard him preach, my friend Roland, I heard him preach on this same chapter. It's probably the best loved of the parables, certainly one which brings great, great blessing. So Jesus is really teaching about lostness, isn't he? And it's an important measure. This son, my son, who was lost is found, who was dead is alive. So lostness is really about, it's about not having life, missing out on life. It's being lost in all senses, physically, mentally, socially, spiritually. So lostness in the sense that we're looking at is perhaps the most important thing. The most important thing is to be found, is to know why you're here, is to know who put you here, to know the God who made you, to have that sense that your life has a purpose and you're fulfilling that purpose which is bigger than you. So lostness is a very big concept, far-reaching. And when we think of that, you've just had a little glimpse of those two sons, the younger and the older. A sense, there are different ways you can be lost. That younger son was lost by going away. He went away from home. Lost out in the world, you might say. How about the older son? He didn't go, did he? But we might say he was lost at home. We might even say he's lost in the church, if we make an application. So it's possible to be lost in many ways. In the more traditional sense, the wine, women, and song sense, or just lost, that you've lost that sense of purpose, that sense of what's it all for. And as our little picture says, we provide the ending, these stories. There's no ending to this story. And they all lived happily ever after, was there? We left, and again, these stories are very, very clever. We've had two feasts in the story. We've had the younger man feasting, but we also have the older brother feasting, but he's not coming into the feast. He's outside, and we leave him outside. What's he going to do? Or we could say, put it back to us, which are we most like? Because I think we can probably all identify in a way with kind of lostness, trying to set on a pathway and then quite not knowing where we've ended up, or if the pathway doesn't quite lead where we thought. Who do you identify with? The one who's far away, or the one who's here around but doesn't quite know what it's all about? Doesn't quite know if God is as real and as lovely to him as he should, that the prayers are said in church and they're very wonderful. Here I am, everything I have, all my life, Lord, but yet you know that's not quite you. It's as if it's going over your head. What sort of lostness? And just to remind us, that little word we read, verse 1, muttering. Don't worry if you start muttering. When we read about this younger son, don't worry if it makes you mutter. Or the older son, don't worry if it makes you mutter inside. Because I think probably we're meant to do a bit of muttering to face up to the situation. Because only by facing up can you find resolution. So here's the younger son. He's going. And you saw what he did. He said, Father, give me my share of the inheritance. He's making his father sell his property. And in those days particularly, you were what you owned. Your property was that indication of your status. You were holding that property for your family, previous generations and coming. So your property was very fundamental to who you were, rightly or wrongly, but that's really how it worked. And the younger son was, I want you to take a big slice of it. And that would detract from the father's esteem in the community. He's got a son who doesn't seem to know how our society works. He's breaking up land. You never do that. So here's a son who's bringing some kind of opprobrium, some kind of shame on his family. Give me my share. I've had enough. I want to go. Give me my share. So the father is taking a big hit. But somehow, frighteningly, there doesn't seem to be much discussion going on. The father just seems to take it. I think this son, he believes he'll find himself by breaking boundaries. Had a little phase in your life like that? He believes that home is keeping him from really living. Dad's rules. All these people who know all your business. Let's go to the big city and the bright lights. So he's thinking you find life by breaking boundaries, by breaking out. Dealing with restraints. That's just old-fashioned stuff. Why do we have to do that? Family, community, church. He believes life is found in terms of personal fulfillment. You must be the person you want to be. You can make yourself anything you like. That's the kind of thinking. To be true to himself, to be self-creating. So that's his kind of motivation. Break those boundaries. Make myself what I want to be. Not have anyone tell me. Not have anyone tell me that I was made in the image of God. I don't want to hear that. I'm going to find out for myself. So here he is at the party, the money goes. He has nothing. Those friends don't seem to want to know him anymore. He ends up feeding pigs. Again, great shame, especially for people from his background. Great feeding pigs, and that plaintive sound. He wishes he could eat it, but somehow his boss sort of counts all the elements of pig food, so he can't get away with snapping a few in his break. So he's in a terrible situation, isn't he? He's in a terrible situation. But one good thing is he knows he's lost. He knows he's lost. What's the difference between him and the pigs? The pigs. He knows he has a father. The pigs don't know. He knows that there's an alternative. So he says, I think of how many of my father's servants have food and enough. So he looks for the way back home. There's a sense in which wherever we are, we have a kind of sat-nav. And it can help us to get home again, however far away. It was a far country. However far away, God has put in us, because that's where we really ultimately belong to. God has put in us this kind of homing device, this sat-nav. Some of you may perhaps think where you were when you discovered you were lost. And how you came home, the people you remembered who, perhaps you say, well, perhaps these people can tell me how to live. Perhaps these people can put their arms around me. Let's just say, so he goes home and he has a little speech, Father, I have sinned before you. Before he can get it out, and that wonderful sense when you're still a long way off, the Father is looking for him. Isn't that extraordinary? How many wasted days does the Father have looking for him to come? How many wasted days, in quotes? Whatever reason he's doing it, perhaps he was doing it so that the local lads in the community wouldn't go and beat him up because of the shame he'd brought in the community. Who knows? But you have this sense of this old man shuffling, running towards him. But let me just point out to you that the son is also, I will start at the bottom, I will get out, I will do that, I will work for you, I think we're still seeing that he's ignoring the true cost of his action. In any act of reconciliation, someone has to pay the price. So people say about this parable, it's a lovely story, but where's the cross? I think there's a cross here because the father is paying for the son's sins. He's paying in money, he's paying in shame, he's taking that on himself, he's absorbing that into himself. Saying, no, you don't have to pay, here's the robe, you're my son again. So he's restored, but the father is paying a big price. He's paying a big price because the son is reinstated. Nothing about going on probation again and being a slave and a servant. No, none of that. Best robe, fatted calf. That calf, perhaps, which the elder brother was looking forward to having with his friends to celebrate another harvest. So the father comes and meets him with his restoring grace. The older son, and here you see him coming home. He comes to himself, he realizes. But I don't think he quite realizes the cost at first. So here's the older brother. You see him in the background? A lovely, disdainful kind of, oh, what's this? What's this? Whom the cat has brought in. It's his brother. How much brotherly love there. You know, it was normally expected for an older son to go and look after the family, for him to have gone and looked for his younger brother who'd gone AWOL. That's what the normal expectation would have been. He doesn't help his brother. And as we said, this brings out in him, if you like, a bad side. The way he talks to his father. The younger son, Father, I have sinned. The older son, you, you have slain the fatted calf. That was a very disrespectful way of talking to his dad. You, hey you. There's a breakup of the community here by this older brother disrespecting his father in front of everybody. What's his motivation, really, this older brother? I think he's motivated by anger. He doesn't like the father's independent action. He doesn't like the idea of grace. In this life, you get what you deserve, is his thinking. In this life, you work for what you've got. If you don't work, you get nothing. He doesn't like the idea of grace. He doesn't like the fact his father is free to make his own choice for his son. I've never transgressed, and you've never given me a party. I've never transgressed, he says in verse 29. He rejects his sense of need. He does many good things. He's good on the farm. He's good. He's reliable. He gets up every morning. He doesn't miss a day. But he doesn't have a sense of need. Somehow that builds up a sense in him that he's okay as he is. What's at the heart of both these men as we come towards the... Let me just say, for the elder brother, he thinks he earns a trouble-free life. If you do good, you get good. That's his idea. If you live good. And that really illustrates his relationship with God, or with his father. It's a contractual relationship. I will do this, you do that. It's a tit-for-tat relationship. It's not based on love and commitment. It's a contract. I'm serving you because I want the best out of life. Not because I want to please you. Not because I'm thankful to you for all the work you've put in for us to have this good life. So it's a contract. But my goodness me, you do that. And people like this, when trouble comes, they can't take it very well. Because somehow they're expecting everything to go well for them because they've paid their dues. They've paid their church dues. They've paid other dues. So we see inside this man's heart is not really an intimacy with his father, a closeness. We might say that lost inside the church. One can be there, but somehow one can be not heart to heart, not rejoicing in the goodness of God. So lostness is in the heart. Both men wanted to be in control. The younger one by leaving home, having no one, bending his ear every morning. And the older one, getting what he wanted by just being dutiful and love. Both wanted to be in control. And here you see, basically in life, there are many things we can't control. And you can't control God either. You can't control God. You can't make God do what you want to do. And as Chris said in his prayer, that's quite a good thing, really, because the things we think are good are not always good. So both wanted to be in control. Both wanted to exercise leverage on God. We've all heard of Mozart, haven't we? Mozart. There was a play someone wrote called Amadeus. Amadeus is Mozart's middle name, loved of God. And in this, there's another character called Salieri. And he too was a musician, wasn't he? And he had made a sort of contract with God. God, basically, I will be a good boy. I will do what's right. I will practice my musical skills. I will do right. I will not chase after women. I will not be drunk on duty. I will be a good man. But I want you to make me famous. In return, I want you to make me the most praised musician in the land. And it worked. And he had a wonderful start to his career. And then Mozart came along. Mozart didn't live like that. Mozart was a naughty little boy. He was getting married, but he was also seeing other women. But the music just poured off him. Oh, beautiful music, but out of this spoilt, rather coarse young man. And Salieri went ballistic. God, I made a deal with you. Everyone's talking about Mozart. Everyone's forgotten me. You are now my enemy, not my friend. And both these men, they seem to want the father's goods rather than the father himself. They both lacked, when it came to real assurance, that they were accepted because of God's grace. I think perhaps the younger son began to realize that. So in their life, there was a joyless compliance. The older son did the right thing, but there wasn't a real sense of joy, a real sense of pleasure. Oh, I love to see my father smile. I think in this story, there's a true elder brother. I think Jesus is the true elder brother. He seeks both the Pharisees and the prodigals, doesn't he? He told this story because he wanted the Pharisees to see a wonderful truth. He goes after both those, as that father seeks to embrace both those sons, pleading with his older son to come into the party. Jesus is like that, the true older brother. We know that he pleased the Father because he loved him. He loved pleasing the Father. That's what made him get up every morning to bring pleasure to his Father. And ultimately, it's what made him go to the cross. Because he loved his Father, he loved us. So we see the true elder brother spirit in Jesus. And of course, Jesus pays our debt. He pays what we can never pay to God himself. He shares his inheritance. You know, if you're in debt, there's one thing to have your debt cleared, but you also need something in the bank, don't you? Jesus doesn't just pay our debt, but he forwards to us his credit. He doesn't take our sins, he enables us to live a more righteous life by faith, by obedience, by learning. He changes us. He pays, he takes our sin. He takes our sin upon himself. That sin where somehow we think that the things that God has made are better than God himself. The things which make our body come alive. Those things where we love God's things rather than God himself, like the younger son. And he takes on himself. So he bears the disdain and the scorn. He takes those things from the older brother on himself. People on the cross, they mocked him, they kicked him, they laughed at him, they spat at him, they buffeted him. He's taken our shame, our sin and our sorrow. And that's what changes the heart. If we can live in that sense of God's grace that the young son felt when his dad came out to him, forgetting what he looked like or smelt like, asking no questions like, what have you done with it? I bet you spent it all. None of that. No recrimination. But just embraced him and received him by his grace and transformed him. And the same with the older brother. We left the father outside pleading, please come in. Please join the celebration. It's not the same without you. Yes, there's joy in God's house. Yes, often the joy in God's house is because sinners have repented, but I'm afraid that's who we are. If you want to come to church without sinners, then I have to say this is the wrong church. But we're going to be sinners. We have to get used to rejoicing that sinners can live together and be changed. So Jesus is the true elder brother. Jesus wants to make Samaritans from prodigals. He wants to change us from being those who've lived for ourselves to those who move with God's love for others. I'm working with an Iranian asylum seeker, someone who came to this country because he became a Christian. All his family are not Christians, from Iran. He said to me yesterday, he said, because I know the love of God in my heart, because I know how much God loves me, I can love other people. And he's got a lot of people to love, so he wasn't treated very well. And he's met some bad people on his journey from Iran, yeah. But I was amazed. You could say, the love of God somehow touched he was transformed because he'd met God's love, he'd met God's grace. He'd been accepted. He'd been cleansed. He'd felt the robe upon him. So God wants to change us from prodigals to Samaritans. It's very easy to get lost, isn't it? Sheep don't have to go to school to learn to be lost. It's very, very easy to get lost. How about you? Are you where you should be? I think we're probably both a bit of both of these people, aren't we? And on the right, there's a missing person. So, is there a sense in which you're missing? Are there people you know who should be here who are missing? A few lost sheep for you to go and seek. Because Jesus is the Good Shepherd. He will see us home. He will see us home. But he wants to join us with him in seeking those lost sheep and realizing that for all we might have learnt over the years, we're not much better than lost sheep. We're inclined to wander. But he can keep his hand on us. So the younger son said, I will go to my father. I'm just going to say a little prayer. And if you want to include that phrase, I will go to my father. If you just want to draw near to God, having seen a bit of yourself in this story, let's take this opportunity.